So we're back with lesson 3. We've built our first page to select and display some data. Okay, but it doesn't look very good. We're just kind of spitting out the names. Normally, or not normally, but often if we have a list of data, we're often using, if we're showing more than one column, I think Jill had suggested earlier, we might want to use an HTML table, right? So we might have data that looks something like this, where we have a bunch of rows and columns. Maybe we'll go here. Let's see. Here we can find a table, some table of data. Let's go. So here where we've got a series of rows and columns, and oftentimes, eventually we'll do this, we'll make it so that we can sort our table. Actually, it's not working on this particular one. Often when we click, we can sort. So what we want to do is take our, do you mind closing the door, please? I don't have to talk over those people. You know, MySQL Workbench will show us tabular data with rows and columns. So how do we do this with a PHP and HTML page? So most of what we're going to do, so we're going to build a new page in a minute. But instead of just showing the restaurant names, we really want to show the name, the address, and the phone number. We'll leave the ID out. We don't typically need to show people IDs. In fact, it's generally safer if we don't show them those ID numbers most of the time. So most of the code we've done here, we're going to do again. What things will be different? There's really only one line we need to change, and then we just need to add a couple of lines. Which line number will we need to change? Actually, I guess there's 2 lines here we'll need to change. Which line numbers? You can see the line numbers here in gray. So 14, what are we going to do with 14? Yeah, so in line 14, we can change the query to get the other columns. Yep. And what is the other line will change? Yeah, and what's happening on 23? Right, so we need to display the address and phone number, not just the restaurant name. What about HTML formatting? What kinds of HTML tags are we going to need on line 23 so that we can put each value in a separate table cell? Yeah, so we're going to need TRs for each restaurant will be in its own row. And then each value will be in its own set of TD tags, right, in its own cell. And we will need, you're right, we will also need like a table tag, an end table. Where are those going to go? So we'll have to add those. Would you put those on line 23 or would you put them somewhere else, the actual HTML table tag? Brilliant. Right, should it go, will that go above or below the for each? Right, so we'll start our table and print our header row first. Then we'll, in our loop, we'll output all the restaurants, and then we'll close the table after our loop. So we're going to need to modify our query, modify our output row, and then add the start and end of our table outside of our loop. So I'm going to make a new file. Whoops. Should be a new PHP file. So we'll get our template and our extension, new PHP. I'll call this restaurants. So the singular restaurant, that's our form for adding a new restaurant. Later we'll use it to edit or look up one specific restaurant. Restaurants plural with an S on the end, that's our list. Add to Git. I'll maybe put on a heading here. I'll use H1. We'll do this the same way we did the last page. We won't write any code yet. Let's write all of our comments and plan out our process. Exactly what we're going to do. So what's the first thing that will happen here? Yeah, so again, we'll connect. Very last thing. Disconnect. After we've connected, what else will we do? Yep. We'll execute our query and store the result. Yep, so that'll give us the list of restaurants. Okay, yeah, we're just thinking in terms of steps, so we'll leave the code out, right? We won't write any code yet. But once we have the data, what are we going to do? Even before we loop. Right, so we'll start the table. Then we'll loop after, right? Loop through the data. Show each restaurant in a new row. And once our loop is done, before we disconnect, we do one last thing. Right. So every table we write in this course, it follows the exact same process. So for your first lab, which we'll go over before the end of class today, this is the process. You don't take a picture, the code is always on GitHub for you, right? It's always online. You can take a picture if you like, I don't offend. You don't have to, you can save your memory space on your on your phone. Okay? The code will always be on GitHub at the end of class. So we're going to do this over and over. You're going to do it, we're going to do it together now. You're going to do it in lab 1, which will be due Monday. You're going to do it in assignment 1, which we'll look at when that is due as well. Okay, you're going to do it in your midterm. We're going to do this over and over again because this is the only way we can select data and show a list of data. Or the most popular way is using a table. It's not the only way, but it's the most popular. So we'll connect. I'm sure it's faster to copy and paste our connection line, but it's a good idea when we're learning to actually code it several times because it's going to become more familiar. This is a really good job interview question. If you're interviewing for a job using PHP, this would be one of the first questions I would ask somebody. Write down what the PDO connection looks like from a PHP page to MySQL database. Somebody who's going to get paid to do this kind of work eventually is going to learn this. I know we're only using this the second time, so we're not going to remember it yet. The more we type it, the more familiar it's going to become for you. Okay, so now we'll do our query. Sorry, can you remind me your name again? Piyush, what query did you suggest that we change the query? Right, we could just use star. You know what? We don't want to display them, but we actually want the IDs because later we want the user to click on any restaurant and be able to edit it. Well, if we don't select the ID, we won't be able to identify which one they clicked on. So actually, it's probably good that we have the ID, right? Because the restaurant might have the same name. We have one Wimpy's Diner. There's actually at least 3 or 4 Wimpy's Diners in Barrie, right? So if we put in Wimpy's Diner with 4 different addresses, each one will have a unique ID. So we will need the ID, so we will use select star. Okay, so what do we do here? How do we execute the query and get the results back? We need 3 lines of code here. It'll be exactly the same as what we did on the last page. What's the first thing we need? Yeah, we'll prepare a command. We take our current connection and we take our SQL query and we prepare a command. What happens next? I forgot to do it on my last page. Won't forget here. So this actually runs the query. What do we do next? Right, then we'll fetch. Which version of fetch do we want here? Yeah, we want all. Why are we using all and not fetch? Right, we're fetching a list. We have potentially multiple records, so we'll use fetch all. So this is exactly the same. All 5 commands are exactly the same as what we did, except we just changed the query to get all our columns. Everything else, we go from one page to the other. Right? Look up. Nothing else changes except that star in our code. Now we want to create a table. So we'll use echo. And we'll generate a table tag. What comes next? Before th. Okay, we need a row. Oh, you said t-head? Sorry, yeah, okay, t-head, yep. Okay, and now? Okay, and what's our first column heading? Sure. We'll capitalize these, it will look better. Right? Whatever the column names are called in the database, those names aren't always friendly names. So we can, so what happens after our name heading? We'll put in 2 more. So there's the start of our table with our first row. So if we load this in the browser right now, what do you expect will happen? Will we get an error? Will we get a blank screen? Or will we have some content on the page? What do you think? Blank screen? Let's try it out and see. You should think we'll have the start of the table? Yeah, so remember, we put that H1 at the top, and our header row does show up, because it's before our loop. Even if we got no data, we're going to have that table showing up. Now, our table, we might want a bit of a border on it, so maybe we'll change this. So what I want here, now notice I use double quotes around this. Most of the time when we're echoing HTML tags, it's actually better to use single quotes. Here's why. We say border equals, this really should be double quotes for proper HTML formatting. Problem is I've got double quotes around the whole string and now double quotes inside. So either I have to escape them, or what would probably be is for me to change the echo command, use a single quote instead. That will allow me to put proper HTML double quotes in my attribute. I can use single quotes here, but it's not considered proper HTML formatting to have single quotes or under HTML attribute values. Double quotes is standard. So at least we get a border. No, it doesn't look very good, but at least it's probably better than nothing. We'll add some more formatting to this a bit later. So now we can use the exact same loop. We'll take our list. So what are we going to do now inside of our loop? We've got I have 4 restaurants. So what's the first thing that should happen when we get to the first restaurant? We'll echo what kind of tag? Yeah, we're going to create a new row. Every restaurant should be on in a new line of the table. And then what? Deal? Not yet. We have a new row. We need one more HTML tag. Yeah, we need TD for table data. That creates a new cell. Now we need to put the name in the first cell. So if we think about it visually, we've created our header. We've now created our first row, and we need the name of the first restaurant to go in here. So again, probably easier to use single quotes instead of double quotes. So how do we now put the restaurant name in the first cell? We'll get our current restaurant. And we're using the dot to concatenate to add the name into that after that opening TD. What comes next? Right, so now we need to close the TD. And then we open the second column. Create the first column, put the name in, close the first column. Create the second column. So now we just repeat the address inside of a second set of opening and closing TD tags. So that creates a second cell. And then we're going to do the same thing with the third cell. So we need one more opening TD, and then we need the rest, the R phone, and a closing TD. Yes, I did. Thank you. It's so nice to have 20 people help you debug your code when you write it. It really makes coding a lot easier. In fact, what I might do is just break this onto separate lines, just so it's a little easier to read. And then what do I have to do after the phone? Right, so there we put our phone in the third column. What needs to go after this, after we close that third column? Right, we need to end that row. So we start the row at the beginning and we end the row after the third column. And now we just loop around, and this will loop 4 times, 4,000 times, 4 million times. However many restaurants get returned by our query, that's how many rows we're going to have inside underneath our header. Right? So this just happens over and over again. So down here, pretty simple. Close the table that we created before the loop. Now here's a very common mistake that happens when people first learn this. I see it every semester. Is I see the table created inside the loop. What happens if I move line 23 inside my loop? What will be displayed? Yeah, well, yeah, so I'm going to have this header row is going to get repeated before every restaurant, right? Because every time the loop goes around, I'll do it later and we'll see what it looks like. So if you see your header row being repeated, that means you've got this line inside of the loop instead of before the loop, right? We only need the header once. Chances are someone in this room is going to do it. It's okay, it happens. There's a good chance that someone is me. Okay. But that's an easy fix. So if you see your header row seeing it more than once, well, you can put it inside the loop instead of before. And then we can just disconnect. So our code is mostly the same as what we did before. We changed our query on line 15. And we created a table above and below our loop. And instead of a BR tag, we just use TRs and TDs to create table cells. So I'll look at this in the browser and we'll see what happens. We'll see how it works. There we go. So that's not a very pretty version, but it's a start. So basically this table, if you look, we didn't include the ID, but it's actually almost exactly what we see in MySQL Workbench when we run the same query. Right? Workbench and any other database tool, if you write a query, will typically show us a grid, a table of rows and columns. So we can now recreate this so someone can see a list of restaurants this way. So whenever we're writing a query, we have different options for how we can present the results, right? I like to think of it this way. It's kind of like if you're you're giving somebody a gift. Right? Actually, yesterday was my nephew's birthday. I didn't get to see him, but I probably should get him a gift. If you get a gift for someone, what kind of options do you have to wrap or package that gift? How could you do it? What things could you use to package a gift for someone? Okay, you could use tissue paper. What else could you put the gift in? You could put it in a box. What else might you put it in? Ribbon, yep. Yeah, you could put a box inside of a box. You could get a gift bag, right? So the actual gift doesn't change. It's the same thing in there, right? The wrapping is just a way of packaging or formatting what that gift is like, right? That's really all we're doing here. We have a query with a list of restaurants. And on this page, we're using table tags, tables, TRs, T-heads, and TDs to package or wrap the data so that we can format it in rows and columns in a web page. In this page, we didn't really use much packaging at all. This is kind of a lousy package. This is newspaper, right? It works, doesn't look very nice. No one's gonna say, wow, that looks great. My newspaper, you spent so much time wrapping this gift in yesterday's newspaper. So these are two of the ways we could wrap or present query data. What other kinds of HTML wrappers might we use to present a list of data besides just a table? How else might we see a list on a web page? Or think about different wrapping. Sorry? Well, CSS would change the design of it, yep. But what other kind of HTML format? So a table, like, yeah, so a list. So something like this, for example, right? So these are the results of a query, right? So they actually have two different lists here. They have lists within a list. This list at the top is one list. They probably used ULs and LI. And then even within each LI, there's a separate UL, right? And they use CSS to control whether the list goes horizontally, like the top, or vertically. So if I inspect this element, I guarantee we're going to see this as, yeah, so it's an LI. Right? So we use UL and LI. So that's a common way of showing lists when we're only showing one column, right? So if we wanted restaurant names, say as like a navigation bar, we could actually try to do that. Maybe we'll do that in a bit. What other kinds of ways do we see lists of data besides tables or bulleted or unordered lists? How else do we commonly see lists on web pages. Sorry? Well, I don't think we can put the data directly in the scroll bar. Yeah, in a form. So what would it be in if we have a list in a form? What's that control called? So something like this. Sorry, that's not good. Hang on. We'll pick this. You're thinking of that? Is that what you mean? Yeah. So what kind of HTML tag generates the drop-down list? There's no HTML tag called drop-down. What if we look at the source of this, what kind of HTML tag are we going to see? Yeah, it's going to be a select tag. So we do this often when we're giving a list in a form and we want a user to pick something from the list. Again, most of the code behind this is the same as what we did here. Connect to the database, write a query, execute and fetch the results, and loop through. But this query, that page, there's no table tag. We're going to loop through using select and option tags. And if we inspect this element here, we'll see an HTML select tag right here. And if I expand it, right, each course is an option tag. So again, we're doing the same things. We're just writing a query, fetching the results, and looping through. We're just changing the packaging. There's no table tags here. There's select and option tags instead. So that controls how the list is presented to the user. So those are the three most common ways of presenting a list of data from a query. A table, if it's read-only, we just want to show it to the user. ULs and LIs, if it's links or navigation, typically. And select and option tags, if it's in a form and we want to give the user a drop-down list where they can just choose one item. So all the code for doing this is almost all the same. The only difference is we just use different HTML tags wrapped around our database values. So we should try these out. So we'll make 2 more pages. Most of the code will be the same. We'll make one page where a user can choose a restaurant name from a dropdown. And then we'll also make a simple navigation bar where we write a query to select the restaurant names and we generate a list of links. So a user could click on a link and it would take them to the restaurant they want. So you'll see when we do these, 90% of the code is exactly what we've already done twice already. The only things that are going to change is we won't have a table. We'll have a UL or a select tag. And instead of TRs and TDs, we'll either have option tags or LI tags. So by the time we're done today, we'll have written 4 different pages that query the same list of data, but each page will display that data differently. Okay, so let's make a new page. We'll call it Dropdown. We're not really going to use this page for anything else. We're just going to learn how to do a dropdown, how it works. So here's what I want you to do. Rather than me just show you how to do this, you guys are going to give you some time, and I want you to try it on your own. And I can come in and help anybody who's stuck. I'm just going to explain what it is we're doing. So your first 5 lines of code are going to be identical from the restaurants page. You can type them or you can copy them, no changes. Well, I guess the other thing is we only need the name here, so you could just select the name if you want. If you select star, that's okay. So line 23 is going to be different. On line 23, we're going to use what tag for the dropdown? We talked about it already. Yeah, we'll use a select tag. So on line 23, you'll create a select tag. Okay, so we're going to need select instead of a table. And then inside of our loop, what do we need instead of TRs and TDs? Yeah, we're going to need option. And selects can only show, we only need one value. You can't show multiple columns in an HTML select. So we'll just show the name. So you can ignore the address and phone number. So that's going to be line, the equivalent of my line 27. I want you to work on this page, and when you think you have it done, if we look at it in your browser, there should be a drop-down list of the restaurant names, and you can click on and pick and select one. But if you're watching the video, nothing's going to happen for 5 or 10 minutes because everybody's going to have a chance to kind of work on their page. Okay? So I will come around. If you have a question, if you need help, I can help you. Try to get it working. If you think you get it working, you can give me a little wave and show me. I'll have a look at it. Sure. So we're going to use select an option instead of our table tags. As I explained before, you can't open this page directly. You must load your form. The form, when it's submitted, will load this page. This page will not work unless you've gone to the form first, put information in the form. You're asking it to save data, but the data has to come from the form. Load the form in your browser and enter data in the form and press the submit button. That will then load this page. Go to your browser, go to localhost. That's the address of your local server, localhost. Okay, hit enter. Back here. Go to localhost/Barry. Take a dashboard and change that to where. You have to load. What's the name of your form? This is called the form page. That's the save page, that's not the form. Which page has the form that we built last week? Back to PHP Storm, and you need to find the page that has the HTML form tag we did last week. Okay, well, you have to look through your pages then because you use different names than I have. So you have to look at the code on your pages and find the one that has the form tag. that has a form tag, but this is the lab. This is not the restaurant form. Where is the form to create a new restaurant? Which one of these pages? That's the file you need to load. I don't think you have that. So you have to. So you can't save data without a form. The form is what collects the data. So your save page has no data to save. You have to load the form, load that in your browser and put the information in, then you save the data. You're trying to save data that you are not collecting. It's like asking me to give you a grade, but not giving me an assignment. And saying, give me a grade, but I have no assignment for you. Right? The form is asking the user for information. You may have to look on my GitHub because you don't have that page. I don't know why you don't have it. I can do that. Don't connect to it. There's just a link in the browser, and the link is on Blackboard. Tools and resources. Second link will take you to my GitHub page. Yeah. Okay, you actually don't need a schema. What is it you're trying to do? What are you trying to do? You don't have access to create new databases on AWS. You just get one. All of the tables have to be in that database. You can create tables, but they're all in the same database. You can't create. You can only create multiple databases on your local server. Right? Because you're the administrator of your local server. You can do whatever you want. With AWS, we give each student one database. When you can't open it directly, you have to you have to fill out the form. The form loads the save page. You can't save it because you haven't passed any data to it. You have to go through here. Okay. Uncaught exception. So there's a problem in your connection string. It's not connecting to the database, right? Line 16. So the problem is with your connection. Yep. This is not part of the host. The host is AWS.computerstudies. You've included your username. This is the web host. Database host does not have your student number.
Just the study,
yes, you have to take your student number out, and also the database name you have is wrong. Take student number out of your host name, and the database name is GC on your student number. Gary Eats is what I call my database. Your database is called GC with your student. So just copy and paste. Okay, let's look at your code. Red line there. Okay. So hang on, you got to read the error. You got to let me read the error message. So this is a problem with your database connection. Okay, so it's not connecting. Unexpected server response. Okay, let's go back to code. Let's go to MySQL Workbench for a minute. Okay, what's the name of your database? What's the name of the database in your code? Your PHP code. Go. Did you have your hand up? You have a question? Okay. Has anybody been able to fill their drop down? Yeah, Artie, you got it to work? Okay, can I see it? Okay, so there's a problem on your save page. It said parameter not defined. So on the save page, when you're trying to fill the parameters, there's a problem. Okay, you said first name, last name, email. Go to your database. Columns. Column names are name, address, and phone. Say first name. Yeah, right? They have to match. The columns in our code have got to match the columns in our database, or you'll get that error. If you get your drop down to load the names of the restaurants, give me a wave. I want to come see it. Yeah, so load the form, right? Okay, so there's still a problem with your connection. It's still saying line 16. Let's go look at your connection. Take out the slash there. Yeah. Looks correct now, so let's try it. You don't have to delete. You can just upload. It will overwrite the file. So upload your save page. Yeah, click or drag it. Just say always and click OK, and then it won't keep asking you, do you want to overwrite the new file? Yeah, it's not necessary. It's not necessary. Okay, just hit read. Yeah, okay, yeah, save. Okay, so now you've connected.
Yeah.
So now there's a problem with your parameters. So your connection is okay. So now you need to go back and look. Okay. Well, it's saying your parameters here. It's saying you have three parameters: colon name, colon address, colon phone. Colon name, colon phone. What's wrong with this one? What are you missing here? Here, look here. Two of these are right. One of them is missing something. Problem is on this line. What are you missing? Yep. Should work now. Upload it and try it again. Working? Okay, the problem is your connection. Your student number is actually the. Okay, but this is not part of the host. That's your database name. So it won't connect anyway. Very good.
So I changed the ID and all this.
Okay, so what happens when you try to save now? Back to your browser. Okay. All right, so invalid parameter. So let's go back. So let's look at the parameters. Name, address, phone. Well, here, you called the parameters name, address, and phone here, but you called them first name, last name, and email there. These values have to match. Well, those have to match the column names in your database. There's no column called first name. Go down here. You do have first name. These column names don't make any sense. These are restaurants.
Okay, how is this?
It should be name, address, and phone. So you may have to recreate that table. Are those the restaurant names in your database? That's what we're looking for. Got it. Okay, so you did it as a UL and drop down. Excellent. Okay. Once you get your drop down to work, you can make another page and do it as a UL and LI. Right? So the restaurants show up as a list. The restaurant names show up as a list. It's okay. Don't worry about it. It's okay. What happens in the browser? Work in the browser. You try to save. Okay, that's fine. What's happening here? Okay, now you need to close that. Remember, the option, that has to happen inside the loop. You start your select, just like with our table, right? On line 23, I started the table, but then I closed the quote, and then inside the loop, I wrote the values. The options have to go inside the loop. Okay, you're close, you're on the right track. Does that make sense? Yeah. Okay, how are you doing? You're restarting? Okay, so you'll probably have to watch the video at home, so that you can catch up, right? Okay, not much you can do before she is doing that. How are you doing? You can't load your site files up. All of your files have to go inside of www group. That's your public folder. So anything you put outside of www group, you're on Azure, you won't be able to see it. Absolutely there. Work. You're getting an error. What's happening? Okay. Okay. One problem is you have spaces in your path names. Never a good idea to have spaces in your URLs. That might be what's breaking things. I would rename any folders and any files that you have space. I think that's why you're getting the gateway errors. You can't interpret the paths. That may not be the problem, but that's a reasonable guess as to what might be causing it. You guys get your drop downs to load? Still working on it? Okay, let's see what happens. Try it. Go back to your browser. What happens if you Okay, remember, you can't open your PHP files this way. You need to open them through localhost. Or you're just opening it here. Okay, so that's your table. Okay. Okay, yeah. I'm gonna try that. Restaurant. Okay, so now you've got a path issue. So this directory, back here. That you called your folder name has no dash. So just take out the dash in your browser. Notice the very top, it says htdocs very eats. You have no dash there. But in your browser, you're putting a dash in the URL, so you're getting a 404 not found error. Take out the dash. Here, take out the dash here. Now, restaurants. Okay, so now you got a database error. Okay, let's go back to PHP Storm. Workbench. Tables. Okay. Looks okay. Go back here. That's interesting because that actually looks. And you have no password? That's kind of curious.
And also it's normal line. I have two files like marriage match views, and when I select that file, so you have one new file like marry capital A, it's like that.
Looks correct for me. That's okay. Looks correct. I put my file on GitHub. Compare your file with my code, which you can view on GitHub. Okay, we're going to go through how to do this. For our dropdown, I'm just going to grab the first 5 lines of code. They're exactly the same. Connect, write a query, execute it, and get the results. At the end, I can disconnect. So I'm going to change my query to fill my dropdown. What can I do to make my query more efficient? On line 13. Yeah, sure. We'll just select the name because my dropdown can only display one column anyway. So now I want to create dropdown list. So I will echo what kind of tag. I can maybe say at the bottom after my loop, I'll just echo ending tag. So now I need my loop to go in here. Once I've started the tag, once I've opened the menu, before I close it. So how will I add each restaurant to the menu? So just echo. Create an option tag. What goes after I open the option tag? What goes inside? Huh? Yep. Got it. Created a new option. I stuck the name in, and then what do I have to do? Yeah, I've got to close the option tag. That's it. There's our dropdown. So the same logic, just different wrapping around those names. if I save this in my browser, I go to Dropdown, and I get it. Dropdown. Now I'm going to do one other last thing with it. What order are these appearing in? How is the order being determined as to which one is first, which one is second? Right, so right now it's by the ID, right? Each one, if I add a new restaurant, it's going to show up where in this list. If I put a new restaurant in and refresh this list, where's it going to go? Right, it's going to go to the bottom because it'll have the last one. Generally, how our drop-down lists, this isn't a very good idea. Why not? To just add the latest one to the bottom. Why is that a bad idea? Well, could be. What if my list is really long? How easy is it for users if we display them in the order they're added in the database? Is that, yeah, alphabetical would be much easier, right? If I have 50 restaurants or 100 restaurants and they're not in any, they're only in the order we put them in the database, it's going to be hard for someone to pick and look through that list. So typically when we build drop downs, we'll want to put them in a particular order, usually, as I actually said, alphabetical. Right? I know if I'm looking for a restaurant that starts with S, I'll quickly scroll down. You mentioned scrolling right through the list earlier. So I don't know if you've done that yet in your database class, but we can easily modify this. How would we change this so that our list is automatically alphabetical from A to Z? So we would go here and we'd add order by name. So now if we save and refresh, our list should be alphabetical from A to Z. So now, so if I go and add a new restaurant now, I'll maybe go and add one more, it should get added to that list in the right place. So why don't we go here? I wonder if there's a restaurant in Barrie that starts with A. Can anybody find one? It starts with A? Oh, A and W. How about that? Can somebody please find an A and W address and phone number we could add? Use your Google and we'll find an address for A and W. There's lots of them. If you like Boone Burger, apparently the vegetarian burger at A&W is pretty good. I haven't tried it yet. Okay. Whoops. Okay. Yep. Probably don't need to put in Barrie since these are all Barrie restaurants. What's the phone number? Yep. 2972. I'm going to save that. And now if I go back to my drop down, A&W is first because we're always going to order. So if this list gets really long, it's going to be easy to find based on Akshay's suggestion that we want to do it alphabetically. So we don't have to do it. So just by changing the query, we can control how the data is shown to users, and we can make it easier for them to see what they're looking for by sorting it this way. So we've done very little differently. We just added sorting to the query, and we used an HTML select and option wrapping so that we get a menu drop-down list instead of a table. So we're going to make one more page. For this one, we're just going to copy and paste everything. What if we want this in a bulleted list? So it just shows the restaurant names in a list and each one gets a bullet. We actually only need to change 3 lines of this code. Which 3 lines will we need to change to get a list of bulleted items rather than a drop down. Deal? Right, so 21 and 28 are going to become what instead of select? We just changed the wrapping from select to UL. And on line 24, option tags become what? LI tags. So let's just copy, Control A, copy everything. We'll make one more file. We'll change the wrapping. New PHP file. I'll just call it list.php. So I'll change my select tag to a UL. We can get rid of the name attribute. We don't need a name for a list. And as Jill said on line 28, our opening UL becomes a closing UL. Our option is LI, done. If you look at this now, we'll get the same list of 5 restaurants sorted alphabetically with A and W at the top and Wimpy's at the bottom. But instead of being a drop-down list the user clicks on, it's an unordered list. Typically, when we have these, we often also want users to be able to click on them. So what could we do if we also want to make these clickable? We just, again, need a little more wrapping. What kind of wrapping will give us links? Yeah, we could just use A tags. So here, let's do this. Maybe we'll say, normally we don't add style tags like this, but we're kind of simulating like a navigation bar. So inside here, these links won't go anywhere right now. Rather than display inline, we'll make the links print horizontally, like a navigation bar. And the ahref will make each one clickable. Oh, my display inline didn't work. But each one becomes a link. Oh, hang on, we'll just fix that. UL. Yeah, maybe. We'll try. Maybe that. No. All right. I won't worry about the CSS part of it for now. So we've just changed the wrapping, but notice everything else that happened to fetch that data, it's all the same thing we've already done 3 other times. Connect, write a query, execute the query, get the results, and loop through. And we can use a table, we can use select an option, we can use a list tags, links. But the process of actually fetching our data and then outputting it is the same on all 4 of the pages we've done. The simple page, the restaurants, the drop down, and the list. It's all the same. Okay. Now, we haven't formatted this stuff so far. We've got a few minutes. So what we're going to do for formatting is we're going to use the Bootstrap CSS framework. Have you used that before? Did you use that at all, or that's new for people? So Bootstrap is the world's most popular CSS framework. So usually what it allows us to do is it allows us to easily create applications that are responsive to different devices. so that we can build a site and we can view it on a computer, on a tablet, on a phone, and things will resize and scale. Now, typically we use Bootstrap because it's quick for doing design and layouts, but then we usually can write our own CSS on top. Otherwise, every site will look exactly the same as every other site. So we're going to download Bootstrap, and we'll link to it, and we'll add a few simple classes for formatting. And then I'll give you your lab, and we're done for today. So here's where to go. So in a new tab in your browser, go to getbootstrap.com. Now, the new version is version 4. We're not going to use this. I'm not thrilled with version 4. They've changed a whole lot of things. Version 3 was out for a long time and is kind of much more widely used. For our course, just for simplicity, we'll use version 3. You're still going to see a lot of it. So up here on the top, I'm going to change version 4 to the last version 3, which is 3.3.7. And then I'll just click this download. Actually, I'll give you an idea of what this looks like. You've probably seen sites that look like this before. Sorry, not in here. Under. So I'm going to click download. It takes me here. If I click this button here, it'll give me a zip file. I'm going to save this into my Barry Eats directory. And then we'll kind of break it out because there's some CSS, there's some JavaScript. So I'm just going to save it into Barry Eats. We'll go here. And I'll just extract my zip file, which gives me this, CSS, fonts, and JS. So these are inside of a Bootstrap folder. We don't need the folder called Bootstrap. We just want these 3 folders, CSS, JS, and fonts. So I'm just going to take those and cut them and go up one level and paste them here. So I now have right in my Barry Eats folder, I've got CSS, fonts, and JS. I can now get rid of those 2 things, the Bootstrap zip file and the folder. So I'll just delete them. If I leave them there, no problem. We just really want the CSS, JS, and fonts. So what I'm going to do now in my restaurants file, I want to link to the Bootstrap CSS file, and then we can add a class which will format our table. It'll make it look much nicer. So in my restaurants file, up in the header, we'll link to a style sheet. And we'll link to bootstrap.min, the minified compressed version. So by linking to this style sheet, if I go back and look at my restaurants page, we'll see that some styles automatically get applied because this style sheet has tons and tons of different styles. And then we'll add a class to format our table. So now when I go back here, and refresh. Well, I'll leave this version up. I'll open it in a new tab so we can actually see the difference. Here was our version without Bootstrap. Here's the version with Bootstrap. What do you notice? What things are visually different? Okay, different default font. Yep. Yep, so the board, right? So the border's still there, but the margin between cells has been removed. So now that we have Bootstrap, we can use some of the classes. We're going to take this border out, We don't need that anymore because we'll use a Bootstrap class to style our table. So I'll replace that, and in here I'll say class equals table. So Bootstrap has its own table class. If we save that and reload it. So it looks much better. So what things can we assume are in that Bootstrap table class? What kind of attributes did it change? Yeah, so the cell padding. Right, it automatically scales to 100% width. Right? So Bootstrap is responsive, so right, it scales my table down in a way that this doesn't necessarily do. So it's designed to be mobile responsive. We can also add one other class. Notice it also bold. Our headers are, actually, sorry, the headers were bold before. We're going to add one other table class. We'll do two. Table striped and table. And notice that my code editor, it recognizes the classes in the CSS. If I start typing, it brings up the matching class options in table hover. The table makes it 100% and takes care of the padding. The table striped alternates the background colors, and the table hover gives us this little rollover effect. Right? Changes the background color when I move over. Now we can add our own CSS to this, but this is a really good, easy way to do some basic formatting. Next year, when we build sites with Visual Studio and ASP.NET, it actually automatically includes Bootstrap. When you make a new site, it actually puts it in automatically for you, which is great. And then we can write our own. Okay. So we'll want to use this as well. Bootstrap also has classes for everything. So for example, our form doesn't look very good. A Bootstrap form eventually will look something like, so you can see some of the samples the Bootstrap classes will give us. So a form might look something like that, for example. So there's classes for inputs and buttons and things like that. So we can make buttons blue or red or green or yellow, or we want to display error messages or success messages. Has all kinds of classes. So we'll use a few of them in here. Just, you know, we're not going to get carried away. It's not a design class, but at least we can make our application look somewhat professional. This will look a lot better than, you know, this. So we'll use Bootstrap for doing that. Okay, so I'm going to give you your lab. So for your lab, you will need to use, you can't use your local host database. For the lab, you need to use your AWS database. Okay? So for your connection is going to look something like this. So this is my local connection. I'll show you what the live connection is going to look like for those of you who don't have it. So your server is going to be AWS Computer Studies. You don't put your student number as part of the host. That's just the server. We all use the same server. AWS Computer Studies, easy enough to remember, right? What's the database name on AWS? Right, BC, 1, 2, 3, 4. What's your username on AWS? Same as the database name, right? We made it easy for you. You actually only need to remember one credential. AWS pass. Right? So that's what your connection string will need to look like. You need to use the, instead of the X's, put in your 9-digit student number. You guys are in semester 2, everyone knows their student number by now, right? The password you will find in your email. So what you'll need to do for your lab, I'm going to show your lab. You only have to build one PHP page. Let's just go over the lab requirements and then we will leave. I will be in my office today until about 2:30. Okay, but there is another class in here, so I think we'll have to leave. So here's lab 1. So you need to connect to your AWS database in MySQL Workbench. So make a new, if you haven't connected to it already, you go to Workbench. Right? You make a new connection. With that exact, you can call the connection name AWS, host name, AWS Computer Studies. You don't have to change the port. Default 3306 GC, store involved, put in your AWS password and click OK. So you have a blank database called GC and your student number. You need to create one new table for the lab. You don't have to write any SQL. I've given it to you right here. Create a table called Teams. It's hockey season here in Canada. For those of you, it's your first winter in Canada, you're going to hear and see a lot about hockey. Okay. So you're going to run this insert script, and it will insert the 16 teams in the NHL Eastern Conference. Okay. Then you need to build one page that looks like this, right? Or this. I don't care if you use Bootstrap or not. It should just be a table that shows all of the columns, shows all of the NHL team names and divisions. So one page, it's modeled on this. So you can use the restaurants.php page as a guide, but we're not querying the restaurants table and displaying name, address, and phone. We're querying the teams table and displaying city, nickname, and division. So then you have to create your page, connect to the database, and use FileZilla to upload it to the web server. Okay. If you're not sure how to connect to the web server, the instructions are on Blackboard. I explained how to do it right here. I went over it in class last week, so it's in last week's class video. And it's also right here, how to connect to FileZilla and upload your pages. I even did a little video demo. I didn't use AWS, it's a different server, but it's the same process. So to submit your lab, then what I want you to do is create a new private repository on GitHub. Don't make it public, because your PHP page is going to have your username and password for your AWS database. You don't want to publish that in a public repository on GitHub, right? So make a private repository called COMP1006 lab1 and upload. You only need one file, lab1.php. Upload the file to GitHub and invite me as a collaborator. Here's my GitHub username. If you don't do this, when I click on your repository link, I get a 404 error and I can't view your code. Okay, so you have to share it with me. Invite me through GitHub. If you need to know how to do that on GitHub, here's how you do it. You go to your repository. You click on Settings. And under Collaborators, you put in my GitHub username. Right? You'll see my picture, blue and white behind. And you click Add. GitHub will email me an invitation automatically. So then on Blackboard, you just need to submit 2 things. Do not upload your code to Blackboard. Give me the link to your repository and give me the link to the page on AWS, gcxxx/lab1.php. So I'm going to click on the repository link and check your code. Then I'm just going to click on the link to the page, and I want to see the list of teams loading in the browser. So I should be able to mark these quite quickly because all I have to do is check one page and pretty much the list of NHL hockey teams is going to load or it isn't going to load. Okay, so pretty easy. You have to create one page only. And you have until Monday at 5 o'clock to do your one page. So we need to get out of here. I will be in my office until 2:30 today. I also have office hours Monday at 1 o'clock. Okay, if I don't hear from you, I'll look forward for your labs and I'll see you next week.